Hey everyone, today we're going to be adding some acceptance tests to our REST API because now we have a bunch of different functionality there. We're doing request validation, we're doing some nice things there, so we want to be able to test all of this end to end. To do these tests, we're going to be using Jest and Supertest. Before we're able to start writing our tests, we need to refactor our application a little bit to make it more flexible and to allow this sort of testing. So right now we have this index.ts file, which is the entry point for our application, and everything has happened there. We're initializing our API, we're adding middleware, we're doing all of this stuff here. So we want to extract this functionality to allow us to use Supertest in a nicer way. So we're going to create a file just called app.ts, and inside this file is where we're going to be initializing our API. So we're going to copy everything from index.ts and we're going to paste it in here. And then we're going to remove the database connection part of this. So here, and we're not going to start our application listening on a port as well. So we're going to remove that. So this leaves us with all of this, just kind of the functionality of the API without actually starting it or starting it listening. So we're initializing our app, we're doing all of this, but we're not actually listening. Then we just want to export default app from this. So we're exporting this full app and all of this functionality. Then we can just clean up our imports a little bit. We don't need create connection anymore. And we also don't need reflect metadata. So this is basically just our app now, and all of this is abstracted. So now from index.ts, it means that we don't actually need all of this anymore. So we can remove all of that. And now we just want to import app from there. So we can do that here. Let's just say import app from app. So now we have app here. We don't need app.use handle error. We just want the app to listen on the port once the connection has been created. So we can remove this now, we don't need it. We can remove all of this stuff that's associated with routing and express, because anything express related is going to be happening inside app.ts. So we've basically just abstracted all of that, which is really nice. So now that we have this separation between starting our app and the actual API layer, it's going to make testing this much easier. Next up, we need our actual test script. So let's go into our package.json and we're going to add another script here called test. And this test script is just going to call Jest. We don't have Jest yet, so if we do npm run test, this should fail. We can see command is not found. So let's do npm i --save dev jest, and let's also save Supertest while we're here. Alright, now that they're installed, let's do npm run test again and see what happens. So we can see it isn't finding any tests because there aren't any there yet. So to create some tests, we're just going to create a new folder, and by default Jest looks for tests inside the tests directory. And inside here we're going to create another folder called acceptance, because in the future we might want to also create some unit tests. For now, this video, we're just going to create acceptance tests, and let's create a new file called user.users.test.ts, because Jest is going to look for files that include this test. Alright, so let's just try to create a simple test. Let's say it. So we can see here that our IDE doesn't actually know about it yet, which is a method that's provided by Jest. So we should install the types module for Jest. So once we install this, we can see we should actually have this it now. So we're getting this. Okay, so let's just say simple test. And this test is just going to be expect 1 + 1 dot to be 2. So now if we do npm run test, let's see if it runs this test. So we can see it runs this test and everything passed. That's great. Nice. So it looks like we're actually ready now to start writing a real test. So let's just first of all add a before each. And inside this before each, we're going to be doing this setup for our full application, and we're going to have it actually running there. So this is going to need to be async, because the first thing we need to do is connect to the database. So let's just say const connection equals await create connection. And this is coming from typeworm. So let's do that. So we have our connection, and then we're going to do await connection dot synchronize. And what this is going to do is it's going to clear the database before each test. So that's what synchronize is going to do. And then we just want to say const server equals app.listen on a port, which is coming from config. And app here should be this app file which we created, which is abstracting our full API. And we're going to be using that inside our test. So here we're connecting to the database, we're clearing the database, and we are initializing our app to listen on a port. And if you remember, this is kind of the exact same thing that we're doing inside here. So inside our test setup, we're going to be running all of this same thing. And we're going to need to access the connection and the server from outside this. So we really shouldn't be initializing them there. We should be initializing them here and server, like that. So we've initialized these variables, we have them in the before each. Now in the after each, we want to kind of clear up, and what we're going to do here is connection.close and server.close, like that. So this actually doesn't need to be async because both of these don't return a promise. So let's just do that. So now we have this before each where we're setting up our application. We have an after each where we're clearing up our application. So now we're actually ready to kind of make some requests. So let's do something simple first of all. So let's say should be no users initially. And this test is going to need to be async. And here we're going to actually make a request to our users route and verify that there are no users in the beginning. So let's just say const response equals await request. And we need to initialize this request object. And this is going to be coming from Supertest. So let's just do at the top here, let's say import star as request from Supertest. And so we're going to await request, and we're going to pass in our app because this is the way Supertest works, and we're just going to say get, and we're going to get users. So let's just console.log the response here and see whether this is working. So just to verify here as well, in order for these tests to work, we need our database to be up and running. So we have our docker compose, which is doing that. So if I do docker ps, we can see that we have our Postgres running, and this is running from our docker compose. We just bring it down first of all, and we can bring it up again. So this is something, if you're going to run these tests inside a CI environment, you will need to have a database running there somehow to run this. But for locally, we can just use our Docker container. And we should have actually ran that Docker compose up in as a daemonized process using the -d to run that in the background. Cool, so that's started now. Let's do npm run test and see what happens. So cannot use import statement outside a module. So this is something that we have to do with Jest to be able to kind of configure it in this way. So in order to do that, we're going to create this jest.config.js file. And we should be creating that here, that's fine. So Jest is going to look for a config file here in the root of the project, and it needs to have some kind of settings there. So I'm just going to paste these settings in. from another project. So here we can see we're using this preset Jest, and we're basically allowing some things here. So test environment node, and we're using this preset Jest. So if we try to run this again, I'm guessing it will fail because preset Jest is not found. We need to do npm i-save dev tsjest to install that. So it looks like there's actually an issue here. Let's see what's happening. So it's to do with the version of TypeScript that we're using. And this is 3.3.333. And we need to use greater than 3.0. So let's npm i-save TypeScript. This should be a dev dependency. Let's see if we can upgrade this version. So that brought that up. Let's try to save tsjest again. And it actually worked that time. Okay, so it looked like I was using an older version of TypeScript, and tsjest requires this newer version. So now that we have this config here and we have tsjest installed, let's see if our test actually runs now. So it looks like our test actually passed. That's good. We aren't verifying anything yet. So let's see what the body actually contains. So inside our test, now let's console.log response.body just to see what's there. So this time the request body was an empty array, which is what we expected because there are no users yet. So we can actually verify that. Let's say expect response. We should be able to verify the status code to be, and I'm guessing it should be a 200, and expect response dot body dot to be just an empty array like that. So let's run our test again, and it's failing. So serialized to the same string. This is something with Jest we have this kind of matcher. Instead of to be, we can use to equal because it isn't actually going to be the exact same thing. This is just the to strict equal should pass with deep equality. So we don't need to pass with deep equality because these aren't going to be the same objects, so that we can use this to equal to verify that. So now that's working. We have this really simple test that verifies that there's no users initially. So let's test something a little bit more complicated now. Let's do should create a user. So this time we want to actually create a user. So instead of doing a get to users, we're going to do a post to users, and we're going to send a test user. And we're going to create that test user here up at the top because we might want to reuse this in different tests. So let's just say const test user, and it's going to have a first name and a last name and an age. That's the three things that we need. So let's send the test user, let's get back a status code, and let's expect response body to equal this to begin with, and let's just see what actually fails here. So we can see now we expected the response body to be an empty array, when in reality we actually get the user back with an ID. And the ID is going to be 1 because this is the first user in our database. So we could actually use this now, and we could expect the response.body to equal. We can use the spread operator to be the test user, and we can do that now to test, but the test user doesn't include an ID yet, so this is going to fail obviously. So we're kind of missing this ID attribute. As you can see, Jest gives you all this feedback, which is really nice. So as well as using the spread operator with the test user, we can also add in that it should have an ID of 1. Okay, it failed again. So this time it actually had an ID of 3, which is quite interesting. And just thinking about this, it looks like this synchronize function takes a parameter. Test this again, and let's see if this gets an ID of 1 now. And it looks like it did. Cool. So it looks like we were just missing that true parameter from synchronize. Alright, anyway, So we have two tests now, and they're both testing happy paths. So let's just write a test now which will test one of the negative paths. So should not create a user if no first name is given. So this time let's try to send a user with a last name of Doe, an age of 21, and let's just leave this like this for now and see how this actually fails. So this is actually testing the request validation that we wrote in the last tutorial. So I would expect that we would get back a status 400 for bad request, and we did. So let's change that. And now we're going to test the response body to see what it is. And we know that this is going to fail because it isn't going to return the actual user. We're going to return that there's an invalid value there. So let's just see. So we're going to equal an array. Let's first of all just expect response.body.error .to, let's do .not to be null. So if we do that, this should pass because errors isn't null, and let's just do expect response .body.errors.length .to be 1 because we know we have one error. And let's console.log the error. So we can do one more verification. So once we've verified that it has a length of 1, we're going to look into that error, and we're just going to verify that it looks like this. So let's just remove that. Clean it up a little bit. So this is what the error should look like. And I'm guessing that this should be 2 equal, because again, it's not going to strictly equal that. Cool. So this should pass now. Let's just write one more test, and this is going to test the negative age. Should not create a user if age is less than 0. So let's just give them a first name, John, last name Doe, age, let's give them an age of -1. And this time we should be able to see that we get this kind of custom message that we wrote in the last video. So we have age must be a positive integer. So here you can kind of see the power of what we're doing here. We're basically writing these automated acceptance tests, and let's just see param age value -1. And we just have to also use the location, which is the body. Cool, so this one should pass. And you kind of get the idea here that we can write all of these acceptance tests, which will basically mean as we're writing our application, as we're refactoring, we won't need to keep manually going to Postman like we were before to test all of these routes. We can have these acceptance tests, which test end to end what our API should be doing. And these are complete acceptance tests because it's actually starting our full application, running on a port, connecting to the database, everything. We're able to send a request and verify what would actually happen if a real request was sent. And these tests are quite expensive, so they take a long time to run. If these were unit tests and we weren't starting our application, then these should run in kind of 20 milliseconds or less. But as you can see, each of these tests actually takes about 300 or 400 milliseconds to run. But they're very powerful because they're going to show what happens from the end user's perspective. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.